Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Interfaith Insights. And just before we're joined by probably the wider audience that tune in, what we do every week is we kind of highlight some positive news stories that are going on. But some of our guests may also have some really good positive news stories that are happening. So having a quick look before I came on, three things that came into my mind were, first one is the story of a Sikh Gurdwara in Slough, which has reinvented itself in lockdown as an emergency food operation, delivering thousands of meals every day to NHS staff and people most in need. We've highlighted in previous shows some of the great work that the Sikh community has been doing during lockdown, and it's another really heartwarming story. Another story which is not really, in some ways, a very happy story to talk about, but I think it's quite significant, especially as a lot of discussion around the Black Lives Matter movement at the moment. 50 years ago, an imam called Abdullah Haron was the first religious cleric to die in South African custody during apartheid. He had been someone that had spoken very strongly out against apartheid, believing from his religious teachings that he believed in equality for all, and did a lot of work actually going around the townships and speaking to people and speaking out against apartheid. And he was so popular actually that at his funeral there were over 40,000 people there.
Wow.
From across all communities. Incredible. And I think the significant thing to me on that is we look at Black Lives Matter at the moment. This is something that we all need to stand against. You know, it's not just one group's responsibility to do that. And I think it's great to actually hear examples from across communities of people who have made, you know, ultimate sacrifice for that greater cause. I think it's a good time to be remembering people like that. And we are hoping that with the peaceful protests that are going on, that, you know, significant change will come about through some of the sacrifice and hard work that people have put in. And again, continuing that theme, one last story I wanted to talk about that struck me was the image of a black man, Patrick Hutchinson, who lifted and rescued an injured right-wing counter-protester during the protest in London on the 13th. And I think that tries to encapsulate the spirit of the movement. You know, it's coming from a position to create a better world where there is equality for all, despite the differences, despite the fact that this person was protesting against the Black Lives Matter movement. He rescued him. If he hadn't rescued him and you know, put his own life in the line there, pulling him out of that crowd, that person may well have died in that stampede. And I think that's just a great example. But actually, Black Lives Matter movement is actually looking for equality for everyone. It's not looking, you know, to stand one group out from the other. It's just looking for, you know, equality between them. So those were things that stuck into my mind. I don't know if other people have any other reflections, maybe from this week or other stories they want to share with us.
Well, you know, Ian, you and I participated on Sunday in the Glasgow Interfaith Association Sources of Solace program, and I was surprised to see so many different faiths and people of no faith come together. For example, there was a gentleman there representing the Druid movement, and his source of solace was photography. It wasn't text. And as I take my morning walk every day, either along the Salisbury Crags or into secret gardens throughout Edinburgh, I find there's so many visual sources of peace in this city. And of course now, with the absence of airplanes and automobiles, it's even more peaceful than ever before. So there are lots of sources of solace around us.
Yeah, I think I would like to come in there. The Black Lives Matters protests in Glasgow. If you actually look, I've been in Glasgow for a long time. You would know that there were maybe about a third, close to a third of Black people there, if not less. And the rest, 2/3, were all white, you know, to put it that way. That tells you that the issue that is being dealt with now is to get to the system itself. But people have educated to that. You know, some of us grew up with this integration that we are not divided. We knew that, even mainly through the church and through some organization. But there are certain components that are still holding. So that was encouraging to see kids and people coming out to support something that is universally required. That was encouraging for me.
Wonderful, that's great to hear that. So people who are just joining us live, welcome to Interfaith Insights, which is a program that looks at how faith motivates people in all walks of life to make positive changes in their life and in the world. And remember, you can watch more episodes on the Edinburgh Interfaith Facebook page and on our YouTube channel, where there are more exclusive interviews. Now, just say that in the last two shows, we've looked at suffering, hope and parents. Last week, we were looking at healing the world. And today, we're exploring the topic of faith in refugees as we celebrate Scottish Refugee Week. As always, I'm joined by my fantastic hosts, Naseem Azad and Professor Joe Goldblatt. Now, year-round, Edinburgh Interfaith celebrate the contributions and cultures of those who have settled or found asylum in Scotland throughout history. And during the current refugee crisis, and for this week, we are, of course, celebrating World Refugee Week. And we're excited to be joined by three very special guests who make a huge difference in levelling the playing field, improving the life of refugees or New Scots, as we like to call them, and other minority groups in our country. With so much of the anti-refugee sentiment that's been going around, especially around Brexit, centering on ethnic divisions, and with the rise of the profile of Black Lives Matters during COVID-19 pandemic, a discussion on the refugee crisis will also look onto the whole aspect of equality. And we'll hear from our guests about some of the great work that they're doing to make Scotland a more equal place. And we'll also be good to hear from our hosts about what their traditions talk on equality. I wonder, Joe, do you have something to say from a Jewish perspective, perhaps, on the message on equality within Judaism?
Of course, the Jewish people are the group that gave the world the Exodus, which was the celebration of freedom from slavery. And that, of course, is one of the early texts and early examinations, experiences of what it means to be totally free. Just this past week, the United States Supreme Court, Ian, approved the protection of equality for LGBT workers in the United States. A case was brought before the Supreme Court because folk thought that it was okay to terminate people because of their sexual identification. And the Supreme Court said absolutely not. So even today, we're still fighting every day for freedom.
Naseem?
So much to say in terms of, we're continue to fight, and that's what really, for me, the message is that we will fight in any way that we can. There's a hadith, I can't remember exactly the words, but the words were wrong. If you can't fight standing, do it sitting. If you can't do it sitting, do it lying down. But it's always about action, and I think that's what's very important. So, I mean, I know right now nobody's out and about. There have been a few protests, but, we've got the platform of Zoom and internet and sharing posts and speaking about against them. So I think, we all have a very, very important role to play to speak out, and I think that's very important. And, we will continue to do that.
I mean, I know this week for the first time I did a video blog with my daughter, and those who don't know, I have a daughter who comes from a mixed race background. My wife is Rwandese, so I think these issues are kind of very personal to me, and I'm kind of worried about what system that she's been brought up in. Will she have these same kind of barriers? This knee on the neck is what people have been describing, and I was talking myself about this, and the thing that one statement that sticks in my mind is from Desmond Tutu, when he talks about if you remain silent, then you're really culpable. You are taking a side. You're taking the side of the oppressor. And I really strongly believe in the teachings within Christianity are about equality, as they are in all of the main kind of world religions. I mean, when we think of Christianity, most people will obviously point to the teaching of there being neither Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free, neither male or female, for you're all one in Christ Jesus. That's the one that most people will point to. But there are similar teachings in all faiths in terms of that. So I'd like to think at the moment we're at a crossroad where there is the potential for change. I think people always say becomes the most darkest just before the light comes. And I think hopefully, these events that have happened in America are going to bring changes across the world. We have to actually build on this and ensure that we look at our institutions and we make sure it's a fair, level field across everywhere. So thank you very much for that. Now, turning to today's very special guests, we have Steven McCluskey, founder of Bikes for Refugees, an organisation who have been distributing bikes to what they beautifully call New Scots since 2016, and have to date donated over 1,000 bikes. And I've read so many comments on how these bikes have possibly changed people's lives. We're also joined by an old friend of mine, Ewan Aitken, as well, Chief Executive of Cyrenians. And we'll hear more about the great work of Cyrenians who help people most at risk from being homeless to transform their lives, which during COVID-19, I'm sure has been a very busy time for Cyrenians and everyone. And finally, we have Jerry Boweh, founder of the Glasgow Gospel Choir and the Zubabasa Beat, and we'll share also his own experiences as formerly being a refugee and some of the great work that they are doing. So as always, we start with Nasim, and I think maybe Nasim has some reflections or a video to share before she introduces our first guest.
Thanks very much, Ian. Yeah, going back to what we're, the current climate right now, it's not really the current, it's been ongoing for so long, and we hope to, in our own way, to make some change in a capacity that we're all, very passionate about. So I'm actually, there's a video that Carrie's going to just play. So I'll let you watch that first, and then we can have a wee chat about that. Thank you very much, Carrie, for playing that. And I think that I felt very passionate that I wanted to share that video today. For obvious reasons, I'm a Muslim woman. There's a Muslim woman featuring in that video. And as Ian said, it's not one community that's, it's all communities need to work together to tackle this this hatred and this inequality. And that video is pretty self-explanatory, but I just wanted to kind of quote something from the Prophet's last sermon. And this is a sermon that the Prophet gave just shortly before his death, and it covers a whole load of topics, talking about women, oppression, and how to treat everybody. But what is relevant for me to speak about today is equality of races in the Brotherhood of Muslims. And it's saying that, all mankind is from Adam and Eve, and Arab has no superiority over an Arab, and nor does an Arab have any superiority over a non-Arab. And also white has no superiority over black, and black doesn't have any superiority, sorry, not saying that very well, over a white, except by piety and good action. And I think that's very relevant and very important. As Muslims, we need to look at ourselves, we need to look inside, and how are we reacting to those that are not Muslims or not the same color or of a different faith. And I just feel that everybody needs to look inside and assess and look at our teachings, and then hopefully make some small changes be more responsible in terms of how we interact with those that are perhaps our neighbours, people we work with, because, you know, racism works both ways, and that's a sad fact. You know, we're racist, people are racist to me, but at the same time, I know that racism does exist within the Muslim community, and we really need to tackle that. So that was my first point that I wanted to make today, and we can share the last sermon on the EFA's Facebook page later on. So so on to my very exciting guest, Steven McCluskey. Welcome to the programme, Steven.
Hi, Naseem. Yep, thanks for inviting me, and yep, very happy to be here. Hi.
Great, that's good. I was reading about your project, and I think Ian introduced most of it, so I probably won't be doing much of the introduction. But I think this is a fantastic project, Bikes for Refugees Scotland. I think the first question that I want to really ask is, you know, how did that idea come about? Because I know you were formed in 2016.
Yeah, so essentially we were operating in 2016. It was essentially myself and a couple of friends, volunteers that were fixing up bikes, and before we had any resources or any real volunteers or premises, we were just fixing up bikes in our houses and giving them out to New Scots, refugees and asylum seekers. We've been a registered charity since April 2017, so just over 3 years, and in that time, we've refurbished and given out just over 1,000 free bicycles. That's all bikes that have been donated by members of the public. So we do get a lot of, you know, we get some fantastic support from communities and members of the public as well. But back in sort of 2016, about 3.5 years ago, I was very fortunate to meet a young Syrian man from Damascus who had just recently arrived in the UK, in Scotland, and in Edinburgh, and he was just, you know, he was in the process of moving into a new house and setting up a new home for himself in safety in Edinburgh. And essentially Yamin had made that long journey like many asylum seekers and refugees. I think it took him something like, I don't know, a couple of years to get to from Damascus, separated from his family and loved ones, and took him a couple of years to get here, and pretty much arrived in the UK and Scotland and in Edinburgh with really no more than the clothes on his back. And Yamin, to cut a long story short, Yamin had bought himself an old beat up bicycle off Gumtree, really just to help himself get around and, you know, and settle into his new life and to help him make connections with local services. And yeah, in many ways, Yamin was the inspiration behind the project three and a half years ago. And between us, we thought, well, you know, if a simple thing like a humble bicycle, something that we very much take for granted, that's it gets us, it's a fun activity. It gets us from A to B. But we've certainly found in our experience that a bicycle, you know, really is really empowering for many people. You know, it gives people freedom of movement, particularly for people, you know, who don't have access to a lot of resources and a lot of funds. So fast forward, you know, sort of three and a half years later, as I say, you know, we've now refurbished and given out 1,000 bikes across Scotland, mostly across the Central Belt, and Yamin is doing very well. He's very successful. He's now working full time. And a nice part of the story as well is that Yamin is now a trustee, a director on our board as well. So, you know, from being that inspiration behind the project 3.5 years ago, Yamin is now helping to inform and shape the future direction of the project as well. So yeah.
That's very inspiring, actually. You know, he was a recipient of the bike, and now this is him paying back, and that's fantastic. So how many people, I know that yourself and Yamin, so who else is on the board? Yeah. I mean, how many people are, and I know this is all a voluntary role, and I think that's what I just love about these community projects, is it's that we do this voluntarily, and it adds so much more to it, doesn't it?
Yep. So my professional background is in public health and community development. My background is not in cycling. You know, my my interest and my passion is very much around community development and working, you know, in the last 30 years, working for local authorities, the NHS, for the charitable sector, very much working in some of Scotland's most deprived communities and you know and most vulnerable groups like New Scots. So yeah, I mean, I do very much describe it as a community, and that community is made up of lots of volunteers like myself. I'm a volunteer. I'm a trustee. You know, I set the project up, but I'm also a trustee, and you know, and this is something I do in my spare time. So we have a small board of trustees which I sit on, and Yaman sits on as well, and people from different professional backgrounds. But we're mostly volunteer led. You know, across, we now have, I mean, from our humble beginnings 3.5 years ago, which was essentially, you know, a room in my house fixing up bikes. We now have two workshops or community cycle hubs, as we like to call them, one in Edinburgh and one in Glasgow, where we have 20, 30 volunteers. Most of our volunteers are also now New Scots, asylum seekers and refugees themselves. We try and train people as bike mechanics as well. So we have many refugees and asylum seekers who, you know, who work alongside us, who are part of that community, who are fixing up bikes for their peers. And I mean, I think it's interesting. I mean, as I talk more and more about the project, I actually describe it less and less as a bike project or a cycle project. You know, it's much
so much more than that. It's so much more about connecting communities, because I've been reading the statements that have been made by people that have used the bikes, and it's about, as you mentioned, people that have come from different countries are on their own, and they perhaps come from a big family and they're on their own now, but because of the bikes, you know, the bike being the catalyst, they're now able to make friends, to meet people, and to kind of have that relationship with the community around them. And I think that is just as a lovely byproduct. I mean, they're getting healthy and all the rest of it, but that is the main thing, isn't it?
And I think importantly, it's about solidarity as well. You know, so when people first arrive here, as you can imagine, you know, sort of, you know, quite often isolated and alone, and maybe fearful about, you know, what lies ahead. I think a simple thing as a gift, like a bicycle, I think can be quite powerful, and people say that to us. You know, I think it says to people, you're welcome here as well, and I think that's quite and that's an important and a powerful message, you know, for.
Do you cover all of Scotland, Stephen? Can you provide bikes to somebody in Oakham, for example?
We try to. I mean, it's challenging for us because we have limited resources and just the sort of logistics around that. Our biggest demand, not surprisingly, for bicycles is in Glasgow. I think something like 10% of the UK's asylum seeking population are housed in Glasgow. So our biggest demand is in Glasgow. But I mean, last year, for example, last summer, I was contacted directly by a newly arrived Syrian family from the northeast of Scotland, just north of Aberdeen, in a small town called Ellen. And 4 Syrian families, 8 adults and 10 children had newly arrived in Ellen. And I don't know how they'd heard about our project, but they, you know, they fancied the idea of accessing, you know, they thought it would be helpful, particularly in a more sort of remote and rural area part of Scotland, would be helpful to have access to bikes to help them, help them get around and connect with their local community and other people. So we put out an appeal for support. And a couple of our volunteers, we took up 16 bicycles, and actually it was if people are interested, they can find out a bit more about that story on if they do a search, bikes, refugees, Ellen, it will come up in the BBC. There's actually a really nice sort of BBC sort of clip interview from one of the refugee families talking about the difference that a bike, you know, bikes, having access to a bike that you know, themselves and children and other families have had. So so it's challenging, but yes, I mean, we will try and get bikes to people where we can. I took some bikes down to some families down to Dumfries and Galloway last summer as well. Obviously with COVID-19, it's everything's a lot more challenging for us, and that's one of the that's one of the things that we're looking at.
You made a very valid point, because connecting, and I think that when you're on your bike, you're able to kind of appreciate, and now that's a beautiful part of the world that you mentioned there, up north.
Yeah.
You know, you're able to appreciate the nature and see all the beautiful things that are around you. And I know for a fact that my nieces and nephews, they've actually went out and bought brand new bikes, because they're obviously not getting out, not getting exercise. So all of them went out and bought bikes, and they're really seeing Edinburgh in a different limelight, in a different light that they'd never seen that before. So I think that's, you know, obviously then the health benefits are amazing. Yeah. Just before we finish off, I think you know, I want to just talk about how can we help with bikes for refugees. And I know one of the things which I've never come across before is you can actually sponsor a bike for as little as £5 a month. I think that's a fantastic way to kind of be involved.
Yeah. So there's information on our website. Our website is a good starting point, and you can find out information about how you can connect with us and different ways, like sponsoring a bike, and some people do that. We do rely, you know, very much upon public support. So the thousand bikes that we have refurbished and given out free to New Scots have all been donated by communities across Scotland as well. So people can donate bikes, you know. So yeah, and it's great. I think you're right. There is a culture change happening, you know, because of COVID-19 around cycling, and more people are taking up cycling. I've always said that the future is bike shaped, and I think that's, you know, I think we're seeing that happening, which is fantastic. And yeah, so our website, you know, people can donate bikes. They can we have a lot of people within communities, university students within universities who hold fundraising activities and events for us as well. You know, because obviously we need resources to be able to refurbish and fix up bikes and give them out. So yeah, there's lots of different ways, and we have a strong community of volunteers as well. So lots of different ways in which people can support us and ultimately support New Scots, refugees and asylum seekers to settle in Scotland.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful way to bring communities together. I think that's a wonderful idea. And we'll share more information on the work that Stephen does on the EFO Facebook page. Thank you so much for coming along, Stephen, today. I know when I say coming along, you just came from your kitchen to your living room, but you know, we all have to come from somewhere. So really taking that time from your very busy schedule to join us to share your wonderful work of Bikes for Refugees Scotland. Thank you so much. Back to you, Ian.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Right, okay. Yeah, we're not going to make any jokes about getting on your bike. We can't really do that just now.
No.
But Joe, we'll go, without any further ado, let's go over to you to introduce our next special guest.
Thank you very much. That was such an inspiring interview with Stephen about the great work that they're doing with 1,000 bikes all over Scotland. It just reminded me of how when my wife and I first came to Scotland 14 years ago, along with our son, we immediately noticed that the Scots were different from all of the other people around the world, and that every Scot is a champion and a defender of the other. And I learned this, Ian and Nassim, when I was campaigning during the independence referendum, and I was handing out leaflets on a street corner in Portobello, and a man who didn't agree with me took the leaflet and threw it in my face. Well, I was shocked. And then two of my fellow campaigners leaped off of their bench where they were sitting playing banjos and started chasing this man up the street saying, "You can't do that to our friend." Well, I was chasing them saying, "Leave him alone, leave him alone." But that was the day that I realized that in Scotland, we champion and defend the underdogs in society. And one of our great champion and defenders is my guest today, my dear friend, Ewan Aitken, who has served as the leader of the City of Edinburgh Council, also convener of education for the council. He's a former Church of Scotland minister. He's the Chief Executive Officer of Cyrenians, an organization that has recently celebrated its 50th anniversary. Recently, Cyrenians was awarded the LGBT Charter Foundations Award for their values, which include compassion, respect, integrity, and innovation. So welcome, dear friend. You've had a very long and distinguished career, Ewan, and I was wondering if you might tell me about your career journey and how you've navigated it.
Mercy, that's quite a question. It is really good to be here, and Stephen, I'm quite inspired by what you've been doing there. We should get in touch because I think there's some stuff we can do together actually, which would be just great. It's also great to be interviewed by you, Joe, and you, Scott, yourself in that sense, which is also really good too. I suppose perhaps part of my journey started out where I lived not in Scotland when I was younger, but in Nairobi. Where I was, and I didn't realize the significance at the time, obviously, I was in terms of my skin colour, an ethnic minority, but of course, not in the same way as folk in Scotland experience it, because my teacher was white. There might have been more folk, indigenous Kenyans there than folk like myself, but the teacher was white. And that dynamic of, you know, who's got the power as opposed to what are the numbers, I think is really, really significant and has always been my question. Who has the power here? Who has the voice? Who is able to make the decisions, no matter what people think? So over the years, I've done a whole variety of things. I've been somewhat of a moving target just to kind of before they catch me. So I've done youth work. I've worked, as you say, I had a parish for a while. Worked with students for a while, got into politics, although I now describe myself as a recovering politician, I hope. That's where Nazim and I first came across each other, although I think we did some good work together, I think, Nazim, on the whole business of conversation about community and difference. But I think if I've learned anything en route and into the world of Cyrenians, which is interesting in itself, is it's an organisation committed to tackling the causes and consequences of homelessness, that has a biblical name but is a secular organisation, which is an example of how it's not a question of you having to believe everything of a particular creed to understand that it has things to teach you. And so in our case, it is about the volunteer, the Cyrenian, the volunteer, Simon the Cyrenian, who carried the burden to the cross and to the place of transformation. But what I've always understood from all those experiences over the years is that what really matters is the quality of the relationships that you can create and the community they can be part of, because that's where change happens. So Nazim and Stephen were quite right to pick out that actually what matters is not the bikes, it's the guys gathering around and fixing the bikes and the access to the other community you can be part of because you've got a bike. It's not about the bike, it's what the bike can help you be. And we see the same in Cyrenians all the time. You know, for example, we do cooking classes, and folk tell us it's not the learning to cook, it is the fact that you sit at the end of it and eat together. And folk will say to you, I remember one guy saying to me, he'd been in the jail for a long, long time, and his fear was that nobody would ever accept him because of his past. But he said, I sat at that table and other people ate food that I had made. And at that point, I knew it was possible that change could happen in my life. It's not that he ceases to have done what he did in the past. It is that his future holds something other than just always being his past. And that kind of space that you can create with the simplest thing of food around a table, I think is probably the message I've learned the most over all those years of doing those different things.
What a remarkable story. Cyrenians is an organization that you lead that operates 37 different programs with hundreds of volunteers. And I've noted on your website that you welcome refugees and asylum seekers as volunteers. So tell me about your work in equalities across those 37 different programs.
So one of the reasons we're a secular organisation is that our founders understood that you need to be open. So you couldn't say we're acceding to one group or another. You need to be open to everybody, and we've carried that principle ever since. So one example is on the cooking classes. You know, we run, or we did until COVID, and we will do it again, Syrian suppers. So we get folk from the Syrian refugee community who can't get employment in other ways yet, although hopefully when they will, but they're brilliant cooks. So they come and make dinner, and folk pay, you know, 35 quid or something for the most incredible 9-course dinner. It's just food to savor. And they get a chance to talk to the folk from the Syrian community. The Syrian community folk, they get paid a proper wage. we make money from that, which raises money for the organisation. So folk can support the organisation by both eating dinner and meeting people from another community. So there's an active integration in that as well. And it's a simple thing that has a big effect. We also have had a number of folk come and volunteers from all over the world in our communities. We have 2 communities of young people, and we also run the Social Bike Village as well. And folk come as residential volunteers and stay there and build community. And that's one of the interesting feedbacks we get from the residents is that it's great having folk volunteering, because those are folk who are there who are not paid to be there. They know that they're there because they want to be there. And so that active volunteering has a profound effect on the relationship, because for many folk who find themselves in tough realities, the problem they face is the vast majority of people who are with them are paid to be there. And it doesn't matter how compassionate you are, it's still in the back of the mind, it's just that's their job. Whereas these folk here are there because they want to be. And that's why we are really encouraging. So we had about 960 volunteers last year across the organisation from a huge variety of backgrounds.
Fantastic. And your whole career has been marked by building relationships. And I know Cyrenians has a philosophy of transformation through values-led relationships. You were already talking today about establishing a future relationship with Steven's organization. Can you tell me about some of these values-led relationships and how they've been successful?
Well, so our values are compassion, respect, integrity, and innovation. But what we say to people is that doesn't stick on a poster on the wall. That has to be in every single decision you make. So we spend a lot of time as an organisation talking about what that means, what it's like to act compassionate in different situations, and to understand that can be challenging at times, because what you want to do and what you can do and what's acceptable often are very different things when you're dealing with folk in tough areas, particularly folk whose challenges mean that they're expressing themselves in a way that others find difficult. So understanding how you can stick with people, because one of the key parts of the relationship, we never give up. We never give up on people. Doesn't matter what happens, we just keep going. Sometimes we need to say to people, you're going to spend a bit of time away from here and then you're welcome back, but you never give up on folk. So those relationships are absolutely key. But by making that the heart of what we're doing, it means that I don't need to take every decision in the organisation, because I know that the people in the front line will make the right decisions because we share the right values. But more importantly, at the heart of that is that we don't say to folk, we know what's good for you. We say to folk, what would be good for you in your view, and what can we do to go on a journey to get there? So that the individuals are in charge of their own destiny. One of the greatest problems we have is when we decide this would be good for this group of people, or this would be good for that folk. So a funder will tell us, we want these outcomes. And I'm going, well, how do we know these outcomes are right for the folk that we're going to be journeying with? I'd rather say to folk, what are the outcomes you want and how do we get there? And one of the reasons why we create, for example, lots of volunteer opportunities is that's often one of the ways in which people can start on that journey. So we've got people who come to us with a challenge and then become a volunteer and then a sessional worker and then a worker and then a manager, and work right the way through and their pathway through the whole organization. Because the question was not, this is what you should do, the statement was not, this is what you should do, but what would you like to do? And because you do that, sustainable transformation can happen.
Well, that's fantastic. Ewan is going to join me for a longer interview that will be broadcast on Thursday evening at 6 p.m. But I wanted to just close this visit by letting our friends know that I had the great pleasure and honor of serving with Ewan Aitken on the board of the Edinburgh Chamber of Commerce for many years. And he was always the voice of wisdom and reason and compassion at the table. And he created, through the Cyrenians and the Chamber of Commerce, the first award for a corporation that worked with a third sector organization, the first one in the history of our city. He's been a pioneer his whole career. And I'm just so grateful when you talked about the journey that we're on, that you've helped us, the Edinburgh Interfaith Association, move a little bit further on our journey of compassion, respect, integrity, and innovation. And for those of you who'd like to learn more about Cyrenians, visit their website at www.cyrenians, CYRENIANS.scot, where you can become one of those hundreds of volunteers, and like Ewan and his colleagues, help us change the world. Thanks, Ian, for helping us keep the faith.
Thanks a lot, Joe. Good to be here. Thanks very much.
What I find so inspiring from everybody today has just been all this work is about really building community. It's about giving opportunities for people. You know, it's less about the bikes. It's less about, in a sense, the meals or the activities, but it's the opportunity that they provide for conversations, building relationships, building friendships. I think it's just been so inspiring and heartwarming to hear that. Does anybody else have any other just comments? Just before I'm going to turn to a friend, Jerry, and put some questions to him before he closes us today.
Just one thing that's become very apparent, and I would hope that it's become apparent for people that watch, is that, you know, what a difference it makes, making a difference. I think that's what that is very kind of prominent for speaking to both Stephen and to you in there. What a difference it makes to somebody's lives, and I think that they carry that throughout their lives, and the impact of that, and the confidence and self-esteem, especially because you were talking about somebody that had been inside. You know, what a massive impact it's had on them, and that's certainly what I'm taking away today.
Yeah, thank you.
It's wonderful. Well, I'll go to my final guest of today, Jerry Boweh. And obviously, Jerry, when you're listening to all these conversations, I mean, you came here as a refugee from Liberia. And I wonder what do you think is a good way to help New Scots to settle into the country? You've had some great examples of the Bright Project and some of the wonderful things that Cyrenians are doing.
Well, I think I met Mr. Aitken before, one way or the other, running the gospel choir, that I think I came across some of you. But yeah, Ian, that's the
gospel choir,
the Glasgow Gospel Choir. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Jerry!
Yeah.
How can I forget? That was brilliant.
Loved
that.
So yeah, so I remember you. But Ian, it's a kind of thing that every helps that come in the circle of a godly-hearted person is from their perspectives of what that person needs, because they are sharing time with that person so they can help this way. But also what's available from them, what can they do? Because we wish to help everybody, but we can't. So if you can offer what you can, then you offer it to the person near you. But when it comes to helping refugees, my point is that from my experience, just briefly, born in Liberia, I was born into slavery. I was born into what you would call the stories of slavery, the stories of freedom, because Liberia is the oldest republic and it's called Land of the Free. But then we have these questions of if this land is free and if it has its history, why are we the poorest? If you check your statistics, Liberia is the poorest, if not the second to the last. So we live through these kind of understanding and experience in the story. Then war comes, and then you experience war, and you experience the danger of war. And in the midst of war, you see young kids, 10 years old, child soldiers, we call them when we're working with them now. Now they are not child soldiers, they're not called. They're killing a human being right in front of you. Now this is your country that you know of. This is your country that you love, but this is the same country that's producing the kind of young people. So I came out of the war. I think I explained it to you myself. I was stuck and I don't know how I got out, but anyway, that's another story. I came out and came to Scotland. And when I came to Scotland, I didn't know about trauma. I don't understand what trauma is until Guy Fawkes Week. That's when I know what trauma is, because trauma is not something that you know of. So that gunshot took me through 3 weeks of hell, reflecting to the gun that I came from. It was that point where I started thinking, but how do I de-traumatize myself? And at the same time, I didn't know who to go to at that time. They said, look, this is what's happening to me. I don't even understand what was happening. And this is where I go back to the music and the rest of it, and decided to help those children back there who are destroying their own family. At that time, I had a job with the Scottish Refugee Council. And the very things that I witnessed and experienced was a story that would come into my desk every day. And I formed the group called African Youth Development Action Project. then formed the choir to raise money because I couldn't raise money. I couldn't get a grant. I don't have the experience to pass all the competitive grants and experience. So I decided to do something because I really wanted that. I formed a choir, and through the choir, I learned and developed my own music and the rest of it. So some of the ways to help is, I mean, I was part of the Glasgow advertisement, Make Glasgow, People Make Glasgow. I was part of all of those big advertisement on the buses and the rest of it. But after that era, nobody cares to know what I, as a human being, dreamed to do through that status that they knew. I just want to go and help those children. That's all I wanted. But now I'm in the midst of how do I manage this. So this is what I've been doing. Work with the child soldiers. I was part of the disarmament. We put the young people together. We did all sort of things to help them. And now we are continuing now to a national level because they know it's big. And it comes back to the war. Liberia have never celebrated the 16 tribes as a cultural diversity. We always fight one another. Nobody organized a celebration. Everybody organized a fight. So my philosophy on the level of studies, and by the way, I studied the youth and community studies. I got my degree in youth and community studies. I got a master in rehabilitation health. And I also have another master in peace building and conflict resolution. So I go into that area to understand completely what it is. So my new project now is the LIFT project. The LIFT project is the same thing we're talking about, Black Lives Matters. We all being in the world, and we know that not everybody that is white or non-white hate another. No, we know that people that care for one another so much that you'll be surprised. They are more than your brother. They are more than your mother. They are more than your sister. So we try to build another hub where this is not about racism. This is not about any prejudice, but anybody who have the faith, the hope that through any means, we want to push this car from A to B, and you can put your hand there. It doesn't matter whether you're gay, you're black or white. That energy will make a difference. That is the philosophy.
So amazing to hear.
Yeah,
What I want to say to people as well is that on Thursday, there's an extended interview with Jerry at 6 o'clock where he talks more about the wonderful work that they're doing through the Glasgow Gospel Choir and the LIFT project that he's just touched on. They've actually helped to build free schools in Liberia, and they're really using the arts as a way to bring around healing and reconciliation. It's just so inspiring to see that positive difference that music is making and bringing those tribes and different people together. So we'll leave some contact details also that you can get in touch with Jerry and find out how you might be able to support some of Jerry's projects better. And he is also working in a fantastic new book called Glasberian, which I absolutely love. The title of that book, absolutely wonderful, to share his experience as Glasgow and obviously Liberian.
Yeah, it's Ian, sorry, I know you're finishing. Yeah. It's just the fact of born in Liberia and living most of my life in Glasgow. When I go to Liberia, they think I'm a Glasberian because I'm saying I. When I come here, they say, where are you coming from? So this dual life and experience, I think, is worth writing about in terms of refugees, migration.
Absolutely, and I'm sure it will give a lot of inspiration to hope, because the one thing that you always give, Jerry, goes all through every music you do, gospel and the music of Zubab basis, is hope. No matter what you're talking about, no matter how difficult the situation is, your music always has a positivity and hope. And you're going to play us out today, I think, with the song, is it Abolition that you've chosen?
Yeah, I chosen Abolition to play this song because it has a message. But I think if you can, maybe I can play it. If abolition is about people that people, that's just what I mentioned to you. But the last one that I wrote during the Ebola, where let's carry each other, is making sense more this time of so I think, if you don't mind, I'm just going to play. I'm not going to sing along with it, so please forgive me. If you want me to do some singing, I will. Okay, abolition, not abolition, but carry each other.
Okay, wonderful.
Can you hear anything at all?
Aye.
I can hear the guitar well.
Carry each other, we got to. Carry each other, we got to. Carry each other, we got to. Together, stronger we can be. Live in peace and harmony. Each other, we got to. Knowing we are family. Carry each other, we got to. Oh Lord, help the fatherless. Oh Lord, help the motherless. Should their parents want the chance to live another day? Peace to the troubled heart, strength to the weakest one. Should I lay to love in this world we live as human race? Father, we got to carry each other. That's it. All together as one. How happy our world could be if we all show compassion and love. What a difference to the world that could be. We got to carry each other. Ooh, ooh, ooh. We got to carry each other throughout the world. Carry each other. We got to carry each other. Carry each other.
Yeah!
Yay!
Bravo! Bravo! Bravo!
Yes, Stephen, Ewan, and Jerry.
Amazing.
Amazing. Thank you from all of us. Have a great week. Stay safe, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.